a moment of vulnerability to share the story of how Phillip ended up joining us here tonight. In the summer of 2020, I hit one of my lowest emotional points. Simultaneously, I started working with the Office of Multicultural Affairs in an effort to lift up and support students of color, specifically Black and African American students, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Trying to navigate social change in a mental crisis was difficult enough, but I was supported by my community, and I made it out in rough shape, but alive. Throughout the following year, I became acutely aware of the conversations being sparked about mental health. When the voices of the conversation were on the global stage, the voices of Serena, Naomi, Simone, I think the world started to listen a little more. When I joined the speaker selection committee, I had a very strong idea of what I thought was the most pressing matter in communities of color, navigating mental health. Immediately, my research began, and naturally, I went straight to TED in search of a talk and came across something so raw and real and vulnerable. And I thought, well, we need to hear this guy. Phillip J. Roundtree is a dynamic and engaging speaker and a master's level clinician who has been practicing in the mental health field since 2005. Phillip is the founder of Quadify LLC, a nonprofit organization dedicated to proving empowerment service to enhance the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual strength of individuals, teams, or companies. He's also the host of Rhetorically Speaking, a digital show on YouTube, and the podcast #YouGoodMan, and a men's wellness podcast. Excuse me. Phillip's work has led to his recognition as a 2018 Black Enterprise Magazine's Be Modern Man. He is also a TED Talk speaker whose idea, Worth Spreading, Black Mental Health Matters, has garnered rave reviews. Tonight, Mr. Roundtree will engage our campus community in conversation of the intersection of human rights and mental health, and how this topic is critical to discuss to achieve Dr. King's vision on working together towards an equitable society. I'll hand it over to you, Phillip.
Thank you. Listen, it's always interesting, right? I never know how people find me, right? And apparently this TED Talk is a big deal. It's allowed me to visit spaces that I might not necessarily ever visit, and engage with folk who I might not ever have conversation with, right? And so to hear KT talk about, just give us a little bit of insight into her journey, and then saying, hey, let me bring this guy here because I watched this video and this resonated with me. That means the world to me, right? This isn't why I do it, right? This isn't why I do the work that I do. The reason I do the work that I do, the reason why I come and have these conversations first and foremost is because I need it, right? This is cathartic for me. Because even though I just recently met KT, right? I can empathize with their story, right? I can empathize with folk who have experienced trauma, who've experienced hardship, who go to sleep and still wake up every day fighting, right? Fighting, giving all that they have to make it through the day. I know what that feels like. And so it's a beautiful thing to hear KT and the resilience and self-determination that she's exhibited during this journey of this hell of a thing that we call life, right? And so again, I'm appreciative, right? It's this means more to me than, I'm about to say means more to me than money, right? Listen, the bills got to get paid, right? Uncle Sam and the student loan people, right? Thank goodness they in forbearance till what? Till May, because folk had to put the pressure on them, right? We know money is important, but this is what keeps me going. This what gives me the strength to continue to speak truth to power, much like Martin did, right? And so I want to say thank you to the University of Idaho for bringing me out, right? Dennisy, Jesse, I appreciate you all, right? I appreciate the Moscow community for welcoming me, right? A TED Talk is about 12 minutes. You still have no idea what you're getting with those 12 minutes, right? And so I'm appreciative for somebody to say, hey, listen, we would like for you to be here. I'm thankful for the students and faculty and staff and community members who came out right now. You could have been doing anything, anywhere, but you've opted to be here in conversation with me. That's not lost upon me. And I'm hoping that you celebrate yourself, because I think, especially where we are now in today's society, we need to celebrate ourselves. We need to love on ourselves. There cannot be an expectation that somebody's going to love on us for us. Folk might post about Dr. King, but everybody not living like Dr. King, right? So again, I thank you, and a special thanks to KT. Again, it's people like you who inspire me to continue to have this real, authentic conversation. And so with that said, let's get to the business, right? Let's get to why I'm here. But hey, that's part of why I'm here too, right? To be honest, to be real. Right? I was trying to hold back some tears while she was talking, just because I'm just like, Phil, you can't do it. But damn it, I cry. And damn it, I embrace crying, because this is real. These are real thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we all have. And what society tells us is, listen, yeah, you might be able to cry for a second, but you gotta keep going. And so what this is, if you get nothing from this, this is me giving you permission to breathe. Me encouraging you to give yourself permission to exhale. Right? Because when we think about everything that you have going on in life, your students, right? Your friends, your family, your pet owners. My cat over here knocked out on the bed. You can't see it because I got this nice Zoom background, right? We're so many things. We're so many things to so many others. But we have to be everything to ourselves. And I think that's one of the key points that Dr. King talked about, right? And that he lived by. Yes, he was everything for everybody, but he was everything for himself as well, right? And he practiced self-love, and the practice of self-love for him was doing it for the people. Now, when they say when he passed, he had a heart of a 60-year-old. And so, yes, maybe we need to say, okay, it's okay to rest. And so, again, this is me giving you permission to rest, because I don't know if somebody else will. And I don't necessarily know if you'll give yourself permission to rest. So with that said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. A powerful message by the ancestor, Dr. Martin Luther King. This message rings true today regarding the societal conversation on mental health within communities significantly impacted by white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. When discussing human rights, equity, equality, and mental health, word choices matter. So I'm intentional in identifying the causes while avoiding labeling those affected, as if their condition is an individual choice or failure, rather than a societal failure or a humanitarian failure. So this past Monday, we commemorated Dr. King, this larger-than-life figure, whose existence was centered on understanding and improving the human experience, especially for oppressed Black and brown folk who endured state-sanctioned violence and are in fact survivors of domestic war crimes. An amazing man. And I don't say that with the cliche voice this country uses when they discuss him in classrooms, or how white moderates and white nationalists invoke his words, name, and likeness on this holiday, but proceed to be the antithesis of who he was in every space that they occupy, most recently by squashing voting rights legislation. When I say amazing, I say it with the fervor and resilience one can only have when you've ridden in the same police car as Dr. King, having been arrested alongside him. I say it with the joy when alongside his children, you run and jump in his arms after he returns home from demonstrating with the people. I say it in a way that you can only know when you've sat in a room with him, empathizing and consoling him as he questions whether he integrated his people into a burning building. See, I've been with Dr. King through all these experiences, even up until that fateful April day in Memphis, Tennessee. Yes, I was there too. Now you may be wondering, wait, how old is he again? I'm 38, but wait, let me explain. See, over the past month, I've had the privilege to be in conversation with Dr. King. According to the Jegna Dr. Greg Carr of Howard University and scholars alike, when you open a book and read the words of an ancestor, you're effectively in conversation with them. You're with them the very moment as they're writing out their thoughts, as you're invoking the spirit of memory. See, memory is the fabric of our soul. It houses our joys, our pains, and all of life's lessons. Memory helps us keep ourselves centered and growing, providing us with a sense of purpose that gives our life meaning. Thus, I sat with his words, navigating his journey, at times delicately, and other times forcefully. I allowed and welcomed the coalescing of our spirits. While in conversation, I became triggered emotionally, physically, and spiritually, listening as he recounted his experience, which were riddled with fear, uncertainty, experiences of human depravity, and unconscionable harm, which have scarred many for generations. I sat in awe of his resilience, determination, the way he emphasized community over rugged individualism that's been so prominent throughout history. The spirit of memory via his truth and vulnerability forced me to reflect on my own mental health journey, identifying the parallels between his and I's experiences and the experiences of so many. Like Dr. King, I found myself at a young age wondering how to cope with the loss of a loved one. For him, his grandmother at 12 years of age. For me, my brother at age 17. He was 24, dying of an accidental overdose from the use of prescription opioids. And so it's important that we take moments to give ourselves the grace and allow ourselves to feel. Right? I never know when speaking truth to power is going to hit me. I never know when speaking about critical moments in my journey will hit me. Just on Saturday, I was able to have this conversation and speak about my brother. As my family and I celebrated 21 years on January 6th. And so I'm allowing myself this opportunity to feel. These aren't tears of sadness. The ancestors are always with you, right? This lets me know that I'm real, that I'm human, that I feel. And I'd be damned if I let anybody shame me away from this. But we're going to finish, right? Because I ain't trying to have y'all here all night. And so for Dr. King, he coped by allegedly attempting suicide, jumping out the window of a second-story building. For me, it was suppressing the pain, anguish, anger, and sadness, allowing it to corrode my insides. This is liberating, right? Remember how I started this? This is about me. I needed this right here in this moment. And it's a beautiful thing if this resonates with you. But this is about me. This is something that I needed right now. This method of coping became my go-to coping mechanism for 15 years as I navigated depression, anxiety, and persistent suicidal thoughts. Like Dr. King, I found myself grappling with the impact of systemic racism, which exacerbated my depression and anxiety. My body vividly remembers the fear associated with matching a description of a person of interest multiple times throughout my teenage years, where the mere thought of it causes my body to tense and my heart to beat rapidly. Why? Because the body is a hub for memories, always keeping score. I'd gained even more firsthand experiences of systemic racism during my college years. I can remember conditionally being accepted into an undergraduate program, along with a disproportionate majority of this predominantly white university's black and brown student body, where we had to be twice as good before gaining full acceptance. I didn't consider it then, but in reflection, being under constant stress for 4 years, enduring overt and covert acts of racism, like being called a nigger by townies that drove around town with their Confederate flag flying proudly on their pickup truck, or watching my Sikh and Muslim brothers, sisters, and persons cope with xenophobia, being called terrorists following 9/11. This kept me, us, in survival mode. I ask, how can you thrive when we're always forced to endure and survive? I can still feel the heartache, anger, and frustration sitting in a doctoral of social work class full of well-meaning white folk on August 25th, 2020, after learning of the police-involved shooting of Jacob Blake, which left him paralyzed. I remember their privilege to not even acknowledge the subject or acknowledge the incident's impact on me, because why should they? We live in a world where privilege trumps solidarity and shared humanity, pun intended. I highlight these experiences through the spirit of memory, which came from sitting with Dr. King. See, we can't have a true discussion about human rights, equality, and equity, especially as it pertains to mental health, without acknowledging where we've been. Where we've been undoubtedly shapes where we are and impacts where we are going, unless an intentional and concerted effort is made to change. Intentionality is an idea that I'm keenly aware of. The poet Solange Knowles emphasizes the importance of doing nothing without intention. Thus, when I was tasked with discussing the intersection of mental health, equity, and equality, it was important for me to not give you what you can Google on your own, like statistics, but to speak in personal and professional truth. I mean, these some real tears here. I don't think it get more personal than that, right? My scholarly background and ability to think critically allows me to discuss and interpret statistical prevalence and trends regarding mental health relating to persons of the global majority. Remember earlier, I said words matter. Thus, the term minority is oppressive in nature, and it diminishes non-white persons while elevating their white counterparts. Cognitively, I'm certain most, if not all of you understand, but it's critical for you to feel what I'm saying. Cognitively, I'm certain you understand the sentiments expressed by Black women Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles last summer when discussing their mental health. And I'm going to add KT in that as well, right? But did you believe what they were saying? Because we know in healthcare, Black women's symptoms are often disregarded, leading to substantial health issues. An exemplar is Serena Williams, who nearly died after giving birth to her daughter because she wasn't believed. Of note, I tend to stay away from using celebrities as exemplars because we tend to view their experiences as isolative anomalies and because their access to resources is unlike many who look like them. In other words, Serena got that bag, right? And that affords her more. But even though it affords her more resources, we still see that she almost lost her life after giving birth, which has everything to do with her gender identity and being a Black person. About resources, and more specifically access, obtaining mental health treatment has improved substantially over the last decade. The allowance of virtual services birthed from the pandemic, the creation of online therapy services to meet people where they are has made an impact. However, for non-white persons, that's not the case. A lack of multicultural representation continues to plague mental health in America. A statistic I will identify relates to non-white mental health professionals. Only 4% of psychologists are Black, 5% of psychologists are Asian, and 5% of psychologists are Hispanic. 1% identify as multiracial. Now, say yes, I'm in a doctoral social work program, have a couple degrees in social work, I actually have one in exercise science. I'm not necessarily a math major. It took me a little minute to figure out what these numbers were, right? But basic math says over 80%, over 85% of psychologists are white. The numbers are even dire when referencing psychiatrists and mental health professionals. Health justice is a human rights issue, and meeting the psychosocial emotional needs of a person's representation matters. This is a health justice issue because a lack of representation leads to over-pathologizing and misdiagnosing, causing substantial harm to individuals, communities, and cultures, something non-white communities know all too well. I can speak ad nauseum about the systemic issues plaguing the mental health of persons of the global majority in this country and how it's being addressed. However, after sitting with Dr. King and invoking the spirit of memory, a critical takeaway was the importance of being solution-focused, which requires much more attention due to the complexities of the issue. The issue of mental health inequities and destigmatizing mental health is one whose solutions require much more time than we're allotted. With that said, I'm going to briefly discuss my approach to reducing mental health stigma. Starting with discomfort. Embrace it. It is a starting place. See, when I was crying earlier, right, that wasn't a moment of discomfort. But at other points it was. And I would do everything to try and avoid it instead of leaning in to what I was feeling. The tears let me know that I'm alive. The discomfort lets me know that I exist, that I am human. But it's important that we lean into this discomfort to understand its origins, using it as a guide as we work through. Second, own your story. Embrace the spirit of memory. Both the ebbs and flows of life, right? It took me such a long time to be able to be open and honest about the cause of death of my brother, who died at the tender age of 24. I used to tell people that he got shot as if that was some badge of honor, right? But what that did was that would take ownership away from him and put it in the hands of another. Am I mad at him? Oh, hell yeah. He downstairs right now, right? I yell at him all the time, right? For him not being here in the flesh, to see his 13-year-old niece, to see his 3-month-old nephew, right? But I had to embrace that. I had to lean into that. And part of me telling my journey and telling my story was acknowledging truths that were uncomfortable. But again, how am I going to continue on this journey of self-healing, of healing and self-love, if I don't own my story? It may not be the prettiest, but the shit is beautiful because it's mine. Right? Embrace your resilience, your self-determination to get to this moment. Listen, first and foremost, we got to embrace where we are. We have to acknowledge that to get to this moment, yes, it might not have been easy, but we're here, right? Yes, we can acknowledge the future and the past and everything that we've experienced, as we should. And yes, we can think about the future and what we would like to accomplish, what we would like to see ourselves in, the spaces we would see ourselves in. But first, we have to recognize and embrace this moment that we're in. We can't change what took place. That's going to always be a part of our story. But how do we cope? How do we respond? And that's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things that we may ever have to do, because this is always going to show up. My experience with my brother, those feelings might always show up. The traumas that I've experienced, the systemic racism that impacts how I show up today, those things may always show up for the rest of my life. And at times I might hide. But then that's when I have to trust myself and trust the skills that I've developed over time. See, again, that's me acknowledging me being human. It's going to be times where I don't want to get out of bed because of the depression, because of the anxiety. But I might got to fight like Apollo Creed. I got to fight harder that day. One of my favorite lines is, "This the game, baby. This is what it is." Right? But I trust myself. I trust myself that I have everything that I need while still desiring to acquire more to cope with this thing that we call life. And a big part of that is community, which is the next point. See, we live in an age where finding community is more readily available than ever before. If you have a puppy with two tails, there's a group on social media for that, right? Community is what helps sustains us energetically as we confront internalized and externalized depression, which impacts the perception of self and our willingness to seek assistance. I lean on my tribe, right? I lean on my partner downstairs, right? I don't believe, I know Drake had the song "No New Friends." Nah, give me some dope people. I need new friends, right? That's community. Cause this life is, we can appreciate it, and it makes it a little bit easier when we're able to commune with others. Educate yourself. There are many reputable outlets that provide information pertaining to mental health. See, I'm 38. I remember the age, and I'm not sure how old Jesse is, right? But I'm sure he probably could remember, and some of the faculty and staff that are here, and some of the students, right? We might have some adult learners here. We remember the era of no Google. Go Google Encyclopedia Britannica, right? And see what that looks like. It might start with the first book is Aardvark through Animal, right? And you got to figure out which one you got to go to get the information that you need for a paper. Or we got to comb the yellow pages. And don't let it be raining outside when they give you the yellow pages. It's going to be all crinkly, right? Maybe I'm dating myself. But Google is a useful tool. Now, I don't know about Kamala Harris telling people just go Google to find out where to get testing. Now, you don't want the person that's a part of leading the free world to just tell you to go Google. But that's another conversation for another day, right? But educate yourself. Also, you can educate yourself by listening to others' experiences. No, our experiences may be different, right? But when it comes to basic things like shared humanity, the ability to feel, holding ourselves accountable, right? Resilience, self-determination. These are commonalities that just come with the human experience. No matter what's happening in the outside world. I say all that to say, information is key. Seek assistance when necessary. Listen, you don't need clinical jargon to describe how you're feeling. All right? You don't need to be able to talk about the duration or frequent intensity of the anxiety that you're feeling. All you need to know is, if I don't feel right, that's enough. Or even if you do feel right, that's enough to seek assistance. And I close with this, and this is something that is so important, right? And I think even though you're in Idaho, even though you might have had different experiences as I, it's something that I wholeheartedly believe in, and I call it Remember Jimmy. And when I say Jimmy, that's James Baldwin, the amazing queer writer, the amazing Black queer writer. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive, who had ever been alive. He's talking about community. He's talking about shared humanity. It's so critical when we're talking about our mental health. Because especially when we're experiencing things like depression, anxiety, isolation is a symptom. This narrow view of the world, the people in it, and the experiences is very real, right? But again, the more we can be in community, the better it is for our mental health. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. And so then the floor is now open for questions. Let's keep the party going.
Thanks so much, Phillip. That was wonderful. Please fill up the chat with questions. As a starter, I would love to kind of bring this up. Families of color, for those of you who don't know, families of color are typically loath to even believe or admit that mental illness exists at all. Phillip, what advice would you give to students or young adults who may find themselves in the midst of mental battles, but in those environments?
That's a great question, right? You know, this is, and you can feel free to come on screen, KT, if you want, right? Because I think it's just black right now. There you go. Salute to you. I think the people need to see you, right? Yeah, right. It's interesting because we mean well, right? I always believe that. I believe that we mean well when it comes to navigating our mental health, even if we're doing it in the most unhealthy way as an individual, as a family, as a community. However, that's not enough at times. But the realization is you may be doing this on your own. Now, and this doesn't mean, hey, don't try to inform your family or encourage your family to understand your experience, speaking truth to power as you see it. But there's a possibility that they may not, right? And so in that case, we need to have empathy, right, for our families, for those who, again, did the best they could to get to this point. But again, it's that consistent communication. It's doing the work on your own, because sometimes being that exemplar is the best thing. How many times have we seen folk like, oh, you know, our friends, right? Family, like, oh, you feeling good, you looking good. And they start talking about therapy and their experiences. Or they start talking about the things that they're doing to ensure their wellness. Right? Like, we know we live in a fat phobic world, right? But we see folk who you might see them lose a couple pounds going to the, like, oh, can I go with you? Right? They might not be there at the beginning, right? They might not be open for it at the beginning. That doesn't mean we stop the conversation, right? Unless it becomes a hindrance to our journey of self-love, of healing, of self-awareness.
I love that. Thank you. There are a couple of questions in the chat right now that are kind of similar. And I'll go with this version of it. Do you have any advice for faculty in how we can best support our students who are struggling with mental health, but not carry too heavy of a load for themselves? Ask
that one more time. I missed that last part.
So do you have advice for faculty members and how we can support our students who are struggling with mental health, but not carry too heavy of a load for ourselves as faculty?
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, as you know, faculty at a university, yeah, I've recognized, you know, the task that it is, right? Because we're navigating not only the, you know, the work, right, but we're also navigating the individual as well. And so for me, conversations, right? Having real authentic conversations. When I think about professors who I believe cared about me, they were those who inquired as to how I was. In my TED talk, I talked about an individual, Dr. Cambone Camara, God bless the dead, right? Who inquired and was persistent, right? Because sometimes persistent is key. We got to think about it. You know, we always have people, you know, first tell, you know, especially as students, we you know, whether telling us what to do, what not to do, right? We have these various spaces where we're asked to show up, but we don't necessarily have the power, right? Or the perceived power, the perception of power. And, you know, we become so accustomed to our routine of, listen, I just got to get through this, right? And that's how, and sometimes professors are that same way. But he reached out to me like, Phil, let's talk. Phil, let's talk. Phil, let's talk. I'm like, damn, man, like, yo, leave me alone. But I had to be in a space where I was able to receive that, right? And so if he would have gave up after the first time, then I wouldn't have been able to have that experience that I had with him after the fifth time, right? But when we're talking about tangible things, and I got this from my homegirl, who's a dean of social work at a university here in Pennsylvania. She brought me in to speak, and she started off with, you know, hey, just check, let me know, who are you showing up as today? Right? And I'm sitting like, okay, let me see where this goes. And it's like, listen, I'm showing up as I just got off my 9 to 5 and I'm tired as hell. Right? I'm showing up as a student, and I'm showing up as a mother who child keeps calling them, right? For the littlest things. I'm showing up as an exhausted person. And what does that allow for me as the educator? That I'm more aware now, right? I'm not necessarily internalizing what's taking place. So if the student, you know, we're in a virtual setting now, right? But if a student puts their head down on the desk, I have a little bit of understanding as to why. If they have their camera off, right? I have a little bit of understanding as to why, right? Because again, they're forced to show up as students in this space. But think about it. Yes, I might show up as an educator, but I'm showing up with everything that occurred throughout this day. But conversely, it's also to recognize what your capacity is, right? What am I doing for self-care? I'm not gonna lie. This same dean that I'm talking about, I texted like, "Yo, these motherfuckers getting on my nerves," right? I'm like, "Hey, what's happening? What they do?" I'm like, "Man, listen, why 10 of them emailing me a half hour before the deadline?" And they know I'm a nice person. I feel like they're taking advantage of my niceness, right? But instead of me internalizing that, I have a sounding board. I have a therapist, right? And so when we talk about these things, and it's also again having these conversations, being aware of what the campus resources are. Sending that email. Hey, I noticed you're typically engaged, but for some reason you weren't in the private chat on Zoom. Everything okay? Again, it's the shared humanity piece, right? For me, when I enter these spaces, like I taught today for, an hour, 15 minutes, for me, like, listen, it's just a label, right? And something I get a paycheck for. But at the heart of it, it's just, I'm an educator, I'm a human, right? I recognize there's a dynamic there, educator, learner, or what have you. But hey, man, you're a person, right? You're a person. It hurts my heart when I have to give a 0 or I have to give an F, right? That does not feel good to me, whether they earn it or not. Because again, I'm like, yo, all of this is happening in the world, but I give myself grace too, right? I question the metrics. All of this is a part of me taking care of myself, right? Speaking truth to power. So if that's saying, hey, why is our grading system like this? Or making changes. This last point, I took an extra class last week because of course, they always hit you up last minute, like, hey, we thought we had coverage. Can you take this extra class? I'm like, cool, right? And so for me, they had an assignment due, and they were supposed to write a 2-page paper or something like that. I looked at it and said, oh, no, 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 no. Give me a page, right? Give me a page. Because I got to look out for myself too, right? I know what the university desires, but I know what my capacity is. And I'm pretty sure I can, if I feel like this, I can only imagine what these students feel like trying to navigate that. So that's a long-winded answer. Hopefully you were able to gain something from that.
Notes. Yeah, no, that, yeah. As a graduate student, I live on the cusp of student and teacher, and it's hard navigating that world. So thank you. Another question: what would you have done differently in your beginning stages as a young adult battling with mental health?
Nothing. You want the truth? Nothing. Right? I can't afford to look back. Because when we think about depression, outside of the organic aspect of it, right? A lot of it comes from things that have taken place in the past. When we think about anxiety, again, outside of the biological aspect, comes from thinking about things in the future. I can't afford to look back and say, what would I have done differently? But what I can do is when I do have conversations with my students who are in their majority of them in their late teens or 20s, or when I go to community events and engage with folk, I make sure I have conversations with them, right? About, hey, it's all about how are you feeling, the importance of communicating, the importance of, you know, finding someone trustworthy with whom you can interact with and share your feelings with, the benefits of treatment. But for me, I don't look backwards, man. I did too much work, right? Because I'm a Scorpio, you know, too. So part of that is word. See, that's why we here, KT. That's why we here, right? Part of part of just my being is looking backwards, like, oh my gosh, or looking forwards, like, oh my gosh, these people are gonna die at some point, and they alive and they doing good, right? So any opportunity I can have to be present, I be present. But no, I wouldn't change anything. Because I don't know if I would be in this moment right now, right? I may be doing something different, but I'm here, right? And that's, I think that's part and parcel for the journey that I've experienced.
I think this next question is a good follow-up to this. Do you have any advice for revisiting past trauma in order to grow from it? Kind of continuing, like, we're conditioned to think, you know, we did it, but either we're not wrong or it's all our fault. How do we go about taking those steps to get to better emotional intelligence?
Word, word. And I mean, there's various ways, right? I could give you the cliche, go to therapy, right? And therapy, yes, therapy can be beneficial. It can help you um understand potentially some of the experiences that you've encountered throughout your existence, right? But again, sometimes having these conversations with the parent, right? Mom, why did I experience that? You know, what was that about? Dad, what was that about? I know my stepfather and I, right? He's in his 70s now. He's and you know, we had a I don't want to say contentious relationship, but you know, it wasn't the strongest and it hasn't been the strongest, right? And for me, it's been within the last few years where me learning more about his story gave me insight into how he showed up and how that impacted me. And so I was able to have a lot more grace and for myself and empathy for him in that experience. Right? So if I felt like he was more stern than need be, I got insight. That doesn't change the experience. But now how am I coping with it? Right? How am I dealing with it? When I speak in person, I usually, especially when I speak local, when I travel, I don't, you know, unless somebody got a foam roller on standby. But when I speak locally, I usually bring a foam roller with me, right? And I give it to somebody in the audience, and I put it on there. I put it on there. I tell them to hold it, you know, put it in their lap. I allow them to put it in their lap. Got to clarify, right? 2022, body autonomy. Um, and so, you know, and I say, hey, so hold this throughout, and it never fails. We'll have some people who play with it the whole time because they have this big spiky thing just sitting in their lap and they trying to figure it out. Then you'll have some people, they'll play with it for a little bit of time, and then they'll sit down and they'll refocus. And they'll have some people who they'll have it, okay, look at what it is, and stay refocused, right? These are our past experiences. They don't leave us. What happens is we shift our relationship to them. And so how can we shift our experiences to them? We can say, yo, that was what it was, right? And there's something to be said about that, right? That protects us. Sometimes the situations we need to know a little bit more about it, right? But all of it is under the guise of helping us be present as we continue navigating this journey of life.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Is it more than 2?
I mean, we have maybe 3, but I think we have time for 2. We'll
Oh
see.
yeah, y'all got to go. I'm just listen,
I
man, and
mean,
that's what I talk about. Like, yeah, we talk like, in the contract 45 and 15, but again, man, it's real life, and we talking about human beings. And if somebody I don't know, it might be that one question where we all log off, but it might be the difference between somebody going to get seek out
mhm.
therapy, or somebody just feeling a little bit more encouraged about continuing on with the next day. Like, who am I? Right, who am I to say no to that?
I dig it. Um, I'm going to take a quick pause and let everyone know we are scheduled to end at 7, but I'm in the same spirit as Phillip. If you want to stay, please stay, and we can just keep having this talk. So this question, um, do you have recommendations for students of color who have a difficult time connecting to white mental health professionals and don't have easy access to professionals of color?
Interesting. Interesting. First, you know, I hate personally. I hate painting folk with a broad brush, right? Um, with that said, I recognize that you know, um, race and ethnicity may be a barrier to somebody seeking out mental health services. Um, and so, with that said, I for me, and I've seen, my first therapist at 24 was a black woman. Um, she was talking to me about her other clients, right? That wasn't professional, so I had to leave there. Then I had a white woman, and she was, oh, Phil, oh my gosh, fam, I don't need that. I don't need that because again, I'm a critical thinker, right? If I'm not confronted, then it's not gonna work. And so my third therapist was, a queer black woman, who had no problem saying, "All right, Mr. Phil, stop the bullshit." Right? She had no problem saying that, and it was like, "Oh, okay." And not because of the manner that she said or the language that she used, but again, this goes to this the I think part of the question, which is this understanding between us, right? And it's not to say that a white person can't be culturally competent, right, and be hyper aware, but it is something to be said about, hey, I ain't even got to tell you about what what's her name, the social worker Kristen Cinema posting a picture with her and John Lewis, what that means for us as a community. And so with that said, let's say, listen, sometimes we are we have access to what we have access to. And what can I get out of it? Could I potentially learn something about myself? And you know what? Hey, I might actually get and some of my homegirls, she goes to a white therapist, right? And she's the truth, right? But I think the initial thing, and I would always recommend, if you feel like, hey, I want to go to a therapist, go. It's a trial and error process, right? You might go, and this white person might not necessarily be for you, but don't let it be for a lack of you not trying, especially if you feel like it's something you can benefit from. And then we do have all of these different, outlets. I don't want to say, the names of these places, because, I'm critical of them. But we do have these online platforms, right? Or it may mean, you know what, I am on Psychology Today. Me personally, I'm on Psychology Today. What it might mean is, you know what, in order for me to get a black woman or a black man that I want to talk to, I might just got to pay out of pocket, right? May see if they got a sliding scale. And so just doing that due diligence. But again, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you can never know who can potentially help you, right? Depending on your reasoning for going.
I can co-sign with that. Here in Idaho, I mean, it's hard, but my therapist is incredible and she really helped me. So go find it. And For those of you who may not know, we have on campus our mental health center, our counseling and testing services. They're there to help us. So I encourage you to go. Yeah, another question.
Wait, real quick, I just want to emphasize it. That you pay money for.
You've already paid it, y'all. Like,
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like they eating all because of you, right? And so I'm a firm believer. Listen, use what's at your disposal before you start going on the outside. So maybe let me go to the student, the counseling center on campus. Okay, the folk there might not be for me. All right, if I have insurance, let me see what's in my network. All right, nothing here. All right, let me, you know what I mean? It's a process, right? But again, you have to embrace the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is nice. Who was your main support during your time of embracing who you are and your story when you might have been hesitant to in the beginning?
Oh man, my main supports, I think about me first and foremost. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't the nicest to myself, and I talked about my insides being corroded through stress, but I still showed up, right? And so, first and foremost, me. Then we go to, we start talking about family. We start talking about community. We talk about my mother, right? We talk about my this feels weird now saying like my children's mothers, right? I have a 13-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. Especially shout out to the 13-year-old mother, right? We good, right? I want to fight sometimes, right? Right. But she caught me in a place where she had to endure more than she probably needed to, as a result of my depression and me being isolated, right, for days on end, and the anxiety and the strain and what that took, right, until my current partner, who I'm a Scorpio number one, right, and so I still desire to isolate and be with self, but she still offers me the grace and she acknowledges, where I am. She challenges me to be better. And so I'm always appreciative to Kanifa and Zakia for what they've been to me in this journey. I think about my friends, right? The silly homies who just talk nonsense. I need that. I needed that, right? Who'll make jokes out of everything. But I also needed the friends who I can text and who I can say, yo, these students getting on my nerves. Or yo, again, I vividly remember being suicidal. My 30th birthday, something I experienced on and off for 10 plus years. And calling my homegirl, who's the dean at this university, being on the side of the road, like, yo, I can't do this no more. Right? And I'm sure I'm missing out on so many others. Right? The person who held the door for me, that just made me feel good in that moment. The person who smiled at me. Right? The person who just looked at me and just acknowledged me. Right? Like all of this plays a part in our journey. Right? Whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And definitely, shout out to my therapist who definitely did a lot of the I don't want to say hard labor, right? Because I don't know what it was like for her, but definitely helped me with this recognition. So yeah.
A question just came in that I think is kind of incredible as a follow-up. I'll read it word for word. Seeking mental help. How do we move on when family is the reason you feel low, but family is a deep root in your culture? How do we let go of deep-rooted parts of your culture that are toxic? And can we still be proud representations of our culture?
Oof. Yeah, that's multi-layered, right? That's multi-layered. I know we live in a cut everybody off society, right? Like cut them off if they don't mean you well. That's easier said than done, especially when we're talking about primary relationships, like family, like extremely close friends, right? So, but first, it's that awareness. How am I showing up in this space? How are they showing up? Can I advocate on behalf of myself? Or is because of the 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 the, the norms and mores of the culture, right? I think about my Black Caribbean folk and how difficult it could be for Black men to be expressive about their not only their feelings but about what they're experiencing with their mental health. And it's recognized, and I can't necessarily change that. What I can do is I can speak my truth. But do I need to reassess my interactions with the family? Maybe. Yes, I recognize that this is what what's transpired in my culture over a generation. Is this the healthiest? Right? Understanding why. Why was this the norm? This isn't apples to apples by any means. But I think about Black folk and soul food, right? So many love it. But we like, yo, this is unhealthy. But then it's like, okay, we recognize it's unhealthy. Now, why did they engage in something that's unhealthy? Because that's what was there, right? And so they experienced resilience and self-determination by saying, hey, we're going to take what's left of the pig, and we're going to make some chitlins. And that's so everybody can eat. So I could be here today. Right? But I don't have to continue that. That can stop here. I can take the positives, the healthy aspects of my culture, and continue to hone them and cultivate them, while leaving those that I may not necessarily subscribe to right where they are with the people who do. Right? And so, again, when we talk about mental health and navigating situations, self-awareness is key. The more you learn about yourself, the more that'll aid you in navigating these complex issues like family, like interpersonal relationships, and how that intersects with things like culture. I hope that offers some insight to the individual.
Yeah, and I'm very, very thankful to them for asking that question, because it's something when we're all dealing with generational trauma. A very good movie that'll help you with that'll make you feel good too, is Encanto. I'm just gonna
I keep hearing everybody talk about that. Like I haven't watched it yet. Like,
please.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh yeah, it's
I think I haven't shed a tear enough for the day. So maybe
then
over the
then
weekend.
watch it tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, and we have our last question. I've been holding on to this one kind of selfishly, because I kind of remember how you responded to a similar question on Saturday. But how do you feel about critical race theory being banned in Idaho? And this comes from a student
where my
who is a future
diet
teacher.
Let me drink my Diet Dr. Pepper that's a little empty. Say the last part of it. How do I feel about critical race theory that is banned in Idaho?
Yes, and this comes from a student who is a future teacher.
Word. Right. Yeah, you remember my response from Saturday. Critical race theory isn't banned in schools in America. Was banned in schools is American history. Right. Critical race theory comes from the origin of critical race theory. The actual critical race theory comes from legal studies, right? And their understanding of the intersections of law and things like race, right? Way above the pay grade of many of the people who were going into PTA meetings talking about they don't want their child to feel discomfort because of learning about American history. And so with that said, again, if you're a teacher and you got some thinking to do, right? Because again, if you're in these spaces and this is the law of the land, right? And it's the difference between you having a job and you not having a job. If you feel morally and ethically compromised, then you got to think, is this a space where I need to be? Is this a place where I need to be? Or if you might go with, hey, I need the paycheck, right? So, but yeah, it's, again, it's an interesting conversation that, again, one of those things that require much more action, right? When we talk about combating things, uh, it's just unfortunate, right? It's just unfortunate because we're talking about denying experiences of not just Black folk or brown folk, in the name of comfort of one specific group, and so cloaked under the guise of it's about the babies, right? When we know research shows that children as young as 2 begin to have an understanding of race, right? Just based off whom they listen. If Black parent, they see Black folk all day, right? They recognize that, and if I see another Black kid in the street, I might go run to him, or in the playground, I might go run to him because he looks like me, right? But what we also know about children is they bang with everybody, right? They'll bang with everybody until you give them a reason not to bang with them no more, right? And so you letting children have a lot more capacity and intelligence and wherewithal than they're given credit for, right? And so what happens is we miss the beauty of learning about other cultures and recognizing the truth about this place that folk love. You know what I mean? Called America. So, and again, you can only shield and bust so much, right? This reminds me of, I'm old enough to remember when Mortal Kombat was like it was like, oh my gosh, we need to ban Mortal Kombat. Now they got Mortal Kombat tournaments everywhere, right? And so because we recognize that, listen, man, people, we're not seeing an influx of self-hate because you learn about the real MLK, not the shishi foo, the feel good Martin Luther King, but not a Martin Luther King who said, listen, you white moderates are the problem, right? So, but yeah, I wish you all the best in attempting to navigate that. And what that means is I'm a social worker by heart, right? So what that means is, we talk, what's big in our profession is advocacy, right? And we believe that everybody has a strength, no matter how heinous the individual is and what heinous the actions committed are. And so when I think about this group in these different places who are advocating, banning critical race theory, right? I'm like, hey, they got up out of bed, they came together for a common cause, and they spoke their truth to power. But what this also means is, hey, all right, hey, I might just, I might be a teacher in Idaho, but I ain't feeling this, how things are going. Maybe I need to run for House of Representatives. Maybe I need to run for mayor. Maybe I need to run to be on the school board. Maybe I need to run for governor. Right? This is how we see change happen. I think about the parents of, Mike Brown, who was slain. Right? I think about, Trayvon Martin's mom. Folk like, okay. I see how this going down. Matter of fact, let me get up in this House of Representatives, so I can be one of the voices to try and combat this. All right. So, but again, this is nothing new under the sun. You know what I mean? And I think that's when it becomes like, and again, I'm not getting into my personal thing, but America always been funky when it comes to certain things, right? And the people in it. And again, this all goes with how are we going to navigate it? When you're a I hate the term BIPOC, right? But when you're a person of the global majority, you realize like we've been navigating stuff. So this ain't nothing new. It's like, yeah, we might feel like yo tripping. But it's like, all right, let's get back to the matter at hand. Right? So hopefully I answered your question without getting too political.
Thank you so much. I mean, no, you're right. New name, same game. Um, but thank you again so very much for coming, for, I mean, virtually coming and hanging out with us and, you know, giving us this outlet to like feel and start healing as well. And thank all of you to coming as well and having this experience with all of us. And also, I would like to send a special shout out to the even oh my goodness, Dennessy, what is your title? She is awesome, and she is the one that reaches out to all these fancy people and says, "Hey, come help us out." And I want to thank her so much for doing this and for working with Phillip to get him here. So I hope all of you have a wonderful evening. Stay safe and be well.